When the Russian constructivists said that painting was over, they were declaring the end to the bourgeois idea that art is a personal expression focused on an individual's vision, which is embodied in objects that transcend everyday life. So Rodchenko uses in his workers' club simple, clear shapes, circles, triangles, so that they are logical and legible to the masses in this room dedicated to the knowledge for the workers. He uses a transparency of construction. Without upholstery, all the joints are revealed. He emphasizes transformability so that the workers using the space can make the space their own. They can change it, they can transform it. There are also two key conceptual terms that the Russian constructivists were using. Factura, meaning the particular material properties of an object. If you look at the word factura, it's related to our word manufacture, the making, how the material works in the making of it. There are properties of the material that determine its making, as well as tektonika, which reflects the spatial presence, thinking about materials, thinking about space. At the same time, by 1924, the constructivists were beginning to talk about their efforts as productivism. Constructivism becomes productivism because the idea is there is going to be more direct participation in industrial production itself. And Tatlin is the first to attempt to transfer his talents directly to industrial production. He makes designs for an economical stove, for workers' overalls, and for furniture, like Rodchenko's. So think about this. These are implements for everyday life that will be well designed to suit the needs of workers. And one of the most effective constructivists to move into production was Rodchenko's wife, Varvara Stepanova, who made fabric. She made designs here for fabric. Here's her fabric with optical design, using the primaries blue and red with white in this very dynamic patterning where there's a kind of dynamic play between figure ground. Is the red in front of or behind the blue? It switches, optical. It's an optical illusion. And then she's wearing a dress made with these kinds of designs in this photograph taken by her husband. And here we see her seated at her drafting table. Notice the kind of tools of geometry that she's using for the geometric nature of her designs. In fact, she made unisex clothing. This was a century before people talked about having a non-binary gender identity. And she's purposely making clothes that are easy and interchangeable, whether you're male or female or non-binary. These are supposed to be clothes that were comfortable, practical, stripped of constricting, cumbersome ornamentation. Most fashion in bourgeois societies, like in Paris, was full of expensive gewgaws and lots of constricting elements that would often kind of like, especially for the female body, would often bind the female body. These were meant to be clothes you can move in and take action in, and they give the wearer a sense of energy and freedom. And Stepanova's husband, Rodchenko, moved into graphic design as his move into production. And he winds up being very quickly one of the most brilliant graphic designers of the 20th century, who's hugely influential, and really all design today comes out of Rodchenko. You can actually see Rodchenko doing a lot of kind of artistic moves, or we should say design moves, that are similar to or possibly even based on Stepanova's designs, right? The stripes, the diagonals, the kind of the way in which the flat, bold colors play off each other. This is actually a very famous poster, which is for advertising books, please, in all branches of knowledge. So that's what the text is calling out. It's made in 1924, and you see, importantly, a photograph embedded with this strong color field of bold, dynamic shapes. The woman is wearing the scarf of a worker. Her hair is pulled back to do work, so she would have been identifiable as working class. There's this joyful quality in her face with her mouth so widely opened. And the brilliant thing that Rodchenko has done is to create this diagonal, which is like Lissitzky's red wedge, but here it's a black wedge with red letters, as if he's visualizing and physicalizing the idea of the voice projecting out, as if this is a megaphone calling out to the whole collective of workers to claim knowledge for their liberation. This is a very powerful address to the viewer. It is also calling out to us in a way that pulls us in. We should remember that this kind of a call of books for the workers was a very dramatic rallying call in 1924. At the time of the Russian Revolution, Russia had about a 70% illiteracy rate. So when we look at all of these dramatic and utopian avant-gardist challenges to traditional art forms, we should remember that in 1870, the condition of serfs in Russia was really a virtual slavery, as Ilya Rapin's realist painting is showing you, of these men pulling a barge. They're literally being treated as human workhorses, mules. So I want to kind of point that out because that helps us understand the sense of this as the future, the bold, promised land for the workers. Of course, the irony is that there have been parodies of this, or actually, I shouldn't really call them parodies, appropriations by capitalist firms who have used this for capitalist advertisements. And in a sense, this kind of language of graphic design that Rodchenko is laying down is every capitalist corporation relies on it today. Take a look at the Bank of America logo or the Mac Apple. These are all predicated on the idea that you use bold, strong, flat colors that pop. You want clarity and simplicity to create an iconic power. Rodchenko created that. Where Rodchenko also made a huge impact is in photography. In 1921, Lissitzky said that the painted picture fell apart with the old world that it had created for itself. The new world will not need pictures. If it needs a mirror, it has the photograph and the cinema. This was a very powerful idea in the 1920s in avant-garde circles. Not only was picturing done, but photography and cinema were going to give us the world, make visible the world in new ways that were even better. And Rodchenko fulfills this mandate in amazing ways. He becomes one of the 20th century's most innovative photographers. We see him here holding his Leica camera. The Leica had just been invented. It was one of the first cameras to use 35 millimeter cinema film. And Rodchenko was one of the first to understand the implications of that and to understand it with an incredible degree of brilliance. Because the Leica was lightweight, he saw right away that it allowed him to pursue photography on the move. Photography on the move means that he's going to reveal the world from unknown, unseen angles. So he photographs from below, looking up. The rungs of the ladder are an abstract pattern. The precipitous angle makes the ladder look like one of Lissitzky's wedges. This is often called the worm's eye view, where we see from below up into a tremendously vertiginous space that just shoots upward. The flip side of this is that Rodchenko will shoot from above, the bird's eye view as opposed to the worm's eye view. Here we have a photograph of the entrance to the Museum of the Revolution, and we get the plunging sensation of the columns, and then the surprise of the figures here, where we have the jarring juxtaposition of the monumental scale of these immense columns with the kind of light touch of the figures that you almost miss seeing. So the camera eye is understood by Rodchenko and his contemporaries as a mechanical eye that goes beyond ordinary human vision. So it is, in a sense, free from the limits of ordinary human sight. And that goes about with a sense of kind of moving into new kinds of spaces and experiencing space dynamically. So this is a photograph, but we still see the tectonics of constructivism, where we see this kind of like spatial activation that allows us to see space in a new way, along with a sense of movement and dynamism. For Rodchenko, this means that he confidently abandons the conventional idea of a good photograph. He's seeking out interactions that are unusual, that actually startle the eye, startle the mind. You could say that he's photographing events, not objects, right? Because a conventional photographer at the time would call this a bad picture if you're thinking about, the object that's supposed to be focused on, the woman seated, her face is in shadow, you can't really see her. But for Rodchenko, this is about a new way of seeing. This is about the event of the light and shadow falling on her to make her seem to be in this grid, like a constructivist grid of modernity. And she, by the way, is holding a Leica. She herself is a photographer with the new lightweight technology of modern life. Here's Rodchenko's portrait photograph of his friend Osip Brik, who articulated the idea ostranony, which is making strange. This is one of the key ideas of the Russian avant-garde, that they are actually waking the viewer out of the slumber of habitual mind by making the world strange again, by making the world new. And so for Rodchenko, this is very much about a kind of photography that is not what he scorned as belly button photography. What he meant by belly button photography is a photography where the camera person, and this is Ansel Adams, very famous photographer, American photographer of nature, using a tripod and a heavy, cumbersome camera because he wants to create a photograph of Yosemite that is a glorious artwork. So he's got this tripod to stabilize the camera. He's got a very big camera so everything can be incredibly detailed because he wants to make a kind of landscape photograph that's like a landscape painting from the 19th century. And that is about kind of a glorious world to be understood through the eye. Rodchenko doesn't want that. He wants a radical dislocation of viewpoint. And he wants you to feel that viewing is moving and moving is shaped by viewing, because movement is the great metaphor for modernity, especially in revolutionary Russia. Marx's theory of history wasn't just that the workers would rise up. It was that history moves, that it changes. And his theory was that the changing engine is class struggle. So the idea was that once the aristocratic class had controlled everything, the mercantile class had risen up and created bourgeois society. What would the working class rise up and do? What would their society be that they would create? And so for Rodchenko, this is an idea of the worker's ascendancy. What a great way to make that visible, showing the worker climbing the ladder, the sense of movement. The other way he showed that is this photograph called Mother, a photograph of his mother, where we see an eyepiece like bricks, where the eyepiece is a lens. Of course, photographs are based on the technology of the lens, the ground glass that amplifies the capacity of the eye. And so the idea here is that looking is an act of intense scrutiny if we are going to create the world we want. And so we need the camera to magnify, to amplify, and to vivify the world.